In today's video, we're going to talk about Christian Petracca, the 618k mid from Melbourne. Hope you enjoy. Joe, Christian Petracca, mate. Tell us all the goss.
I love this guy. He's a very handsome fella. He's very good at footy. You just got to love watching him burst out of the pack, the Italian stallion. And as a proud owner of him last year, I'm proud to say that I'm a massive fan. I've got a man crush on him. I can't deny it.
Yeah. You reckon he's a good cook? I'm not quite sure. The Italian genes kind of fits in there a little bit, right?
I don't know, man. I think he's more of a gamer than a cook. If you look at his cash converters advertisement, taking
that's
one console at a time. So I'm not sure if he's the one cooking. He's too busy going one console at a time. So look, but I don't mind. This is his world, and it's all just a simulation. We're playing his game, and we're here to talk about him and his scoring output, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely true. So let's get into it. We're doing the Christian Petracca review, starting off with his scoring from last year.
Yeah, so he was 8th overall in all of the mids last year. It was his 3rd straight year, averaging over 110. And that just, it's just fitting for a guy of his caliber entering into the prime of his career. It's going to be a long prime, both him and Clary, that's for sure. And so three straight years of 110, that's someone that is someone that you have to keep on your radar 100%, because that's now building a really significant body of work, with 8 of those 8 scores this year being monster over 120. Now, what the hell is going on over there? Is that the son of Petracca flying by through the midfield, kicking it inside forward 50? What the hell was that?
Oh, mate, I just saw him go past. I'm like, wow. Maybe that was Brody Grundy on like his little moped thing,
That was unbelievable. That was so good. But yeah, that's probably the sound that Petracca was making when you went over 128 times this year.
Yeah, definitely.
And he had 4 games between 100 and 120. So that's 12 scores over the 100 mark out of the 22 games, which is quite good. And then he had 10 scores, of course. 12 plus 10 is 22. Scores under 100. 5 of those in the 90s. So he could have very well have had 5 extra scores over 100 had he been a bit cleaner with his disposal. Probably one of the biggest knocks on him as a player is a bit of a clanger king, a bit of a butcher sometimes. But I think this year that went by, we saw a big improvement in that.
Yeah, it really feels like these high-impact players, we've talked about LDU in the past before, but these high-impact players who will get the ball, they'll run for it, they'll be really damaging. Sometimes their clangers kind of hit them a bit, can derail them a little bit that way. You're more worried about getting rid of the ball than actually pinpoint accuracy somewhere on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for them, where this year in particular, with the loss of McDonald, they didn't really have much in terms of key forward stocks. And I think they just really wanted the ball to hit the ground so that a guy like Cozzy Pickett can get to work. His scoring could have well and truly been better because, he had 3 games in the 80s as well. But in those games, he had 7 clangers, and 6 clangers. And we know that a clanger is minus 4 points. So, for each of those games, he could have well and truly gone over 100 as well. So he would have ended up with, if you had those 5 in the 90s, be hundreds, and then the extra 3 in the 80s. So he could have had an extra 8 games over 100, in addition to the 8 that he already had over 120 and the 4. So I just goes to show that his consistency is really improving year upon year. And it's surprising to me that his ownership is so low this year.
Yeah, definitely. So last year we saw a couple of monster scores. So ceiling of 189, which was fantastic for the owners that had him. Obviously, sad to say I didn't have him. Just couldn't fit him in at the time, but that 189 was pretty rough. Watching him please don't get to 200. Please don't get to 200. 189 in round 16, and then a 163 at the start of the season. So some monster scores. He did have some scores that were pretty low as well. So with lowest score of a 50. It's pretty seesaw for Petracca. Maybe we'll kind of get into the pros and cons of the pick.
Yeah. So that, but in his defense, that 50 game was a game where he was ill. He was battling illness, and despite without resting him, the Melbourne decided to rest him at full forward for that game. And unfortunately, it was a game in the wet where Melbourne got steamrolled in the second half of that game by Freo, and he only had like 10 touches. So I think you can excuse him for that 50 game there, and it's definitely an aberration. So, but there's definitely a lot of pros to this pick, absolutely, because from rounds 1 to 19 last year, his average CBAs were 65%. Okay, then though, from round 20 to round 23, his CBAs actually dropped to 51%. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's not a pro, but it actually is, because it did not impact his scoring at all. This guy, in fact, was able to pump out some more 130s and some 134, 136, 99, and 117, simply because it just goes to show that his avenues for scoring are not 100% limited to having a lot of CBAs. He can give up some CBAs to a guy like Brayshaw, for example, who's sticking up, and he can still find the ball at will all over the ground and have a lot of score involvement, as well as kick a goal or two every game to bolster that scoring up. So I think having a guy like him with multiple avenues for scoring is definitely a pro in this situation.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, he doesn't have to be around the ruckman to get the ball and score well for us in Supercoach like some other midfielders. Are there any kind of cons or worries this year heading into the new year with picking him?
Probably that we saw last year in particular that some teams are now starting to target him as a tagging option. So I know Essendon tagged him, tried to tag him, Port tried to tag him, and West Coast as well. So those are three separate teams that identified him as someone that, due to his high impact and line breaking ability, someone that they would probably have to limit. He still scored well, and against Essendon he scored 98, Port he scored 85, and West Coast he scored 136. But I mean, against West Coast everybody was scoring well. Let's be real. So it could very well be that he could have a lot more attention this year. You got Ross the Boss Lion now at St Kilda. He's a tagging coach. You've got Brad Scott. He's also one who likes to use a tag as well. You would know from your North Melbourne days. So you've got now a couple more coaches who come in. Kingsley, we don't know how he rolls, whether or not he's going to maintain the good old tagging days of GWS. But you've got more coaches now in the league that are more open to tagging. So he could be open to a tag, especially if Brayshaw, if Clayton Oliver, by reports, his thumb still not up to scratch, still causing him issues during the preseason. A lot more responsibility could fall onto Petrarca, which just makes tagging him all the more obvious. That's probably one of the big cons for that pick, as well as he tends to actually perform better after the bye. He's historically been known, before the bye, he would average around 106 to 107 points, and then after the bye, he'd just jump up to 120 for the rest of the year. So he seems to be a player that is very tradable to get into your side later in the year.
Yeah, definitely. And because he's so versatile on field as well, that as Melbourne's midfield gets better, they brought in Hunter from the Bulldogs. Obviously, we've talked about Brayshaw coming in and being a bit more explosive and taking up some more mid-time there. Petracca will be the one that may get pushed forward a lot more during a game. So, if he's not the target, if Ben Brown or Van Ruin or, Tom McDonald comes back in, Petracca could miss out on some extra points there. So there's something to worry about. Just kind of finishing up, what's your feelings about him? Do you think you're going to start with him? How are you feeling there?
I'm thinking of not starting him. I think he's just been so good after the bye, year upon year, and he is capable, as you're saying. He could be moved around and play a bit more forward in a particular week, which could result in him dropping a lower score than usual, which could then drop his price. And I think at that point would be the opportune moment to bring him in. He's an upgrade target for me. At this point, I won't be starting him. What about you, Big J?
Yeah, definitely the same for me. He seems like one of those players historically that, round 6 to 9 or even just after the buys, that he'll end up being in a price that you can upgrade a mid-pricer or 2 rookies to get in and not kind of feel the pinch that way. So there may be some better options there, but definitely an upgrade target. Because I missed out on last year, he's someone I want to bring in now.
Yeah, I reckon he's top 10, personally speaking.
Definitely.
So for me, you want to have the top 10. Of course, top 8 is ideal. But if you're having the top 10 mids, I think the gap between 8 and 10, I don't think is too astronomical. As long as you're averaging just over 110, then I think you're fine. And personally, I think Petracca is someone who can well and truly average 110, especially if he has a full preseason like he has to date. So please keep an eye out on this guy.
Yeah, you don't want to miss out on those monster scores and be the guy with the the player that scores a 60.
No, you don't.
All right, guys, this is our Petracca review for 2023. If you like the content, remember, like, share, and subscribe. Check out our group video as well, where we're giving away some awesome prizes for this year, just by subscribing and then joining our group. So we're coming up with some more player reviews. Any last words, Joe?
We're pumping those out. That's it. We might be a bit late to the party compared to others, but believe me, those reviews, they're going to be coming out in force. So please stay tuned, guys.